Hello, and welcome back to the studio. I'm Dr. Wiggo, and today we're talking about Apple's lawsuit against OpenAI. I normally wouldn't do a video about something like this, but this story is just too good to pass up. Before we begin, let me emphasize that I am not a lawyer, so this will all be a layman's look at this lawsuit, and that all of the allegations in the suit are just that, allegations to be examined in court. So I'm going to start with an overview of the lawsuit, then look at some background like the timeline of OpenAI and their relationship with Apple, then look at some of the very juicy specifics outlined in Apple's filing. And as always, at the end, I will give you my take on all this. So let's dive right in. On July 10th, Apple filed a federal lawsuit in California against OpenAI alleging theft of trade secrets. Named defendants in the suit are Chang Liu, Tang Tan, OpenAI and a bunch of its subsidiary companies, and IO Products, which was Johnny Ive's company that was acquired by OpenAI for $6.5 billion in 2025. Chang Liu was a senior system electrical engineer who left Apple in January of 2026 after 8 years to join OpenAI. Tang Tan was with Apple for 25 years and left his job as vice president of iPhone and watch design in 2024 to join Johnny Ive and others in co-founding IO Products. The suit alleges that both Liu and Tan took confidential documents with them when they left, and that Liu continued to access Apple's network to steal additional documents after he left the company and was working for OpenAI. The complaint goes on to add a lot of details that we will get to in the chapter on specifics coming up in a few minutes. I should note that OpenAI has apparently hired over 400 former Apple employees. More on that later. First, let me give you some background on OpenAI and IO Products. I'm sure you've probably heard of OpenAI, or at least their primary product, ChatGPT. OpenAI was founded in 2015 by Sam Altman, Elon Musk, yes, that guy, and others, and their first model, GPT, came out in 2018. The same year, Elon resigned from the board due to a conflict of interest, as Tesla was also developing AI for self-driving cars. ChatGPT came out in 2022, and in 2024, OpenAI partnered with Apple to bring ChatGPT to iPhone and other Apple devices. You know, after Smart Siri was a big flop and they had to roll that back a couple of years. Also in 2024, Elon Musk sued OpenAI for breach of contract. He ultimately lost. And Johnny Ive, Tang Tan, and others founded IO Products, which was then acquired by OpenAI in 2025 when Tang Tan became chief hardware officer at OpenAI, a company that has no hardware. Then, in January 2026, Apple announced its partnership with Google for Apple Intelligence. In March, OpenAI got $122 billion in funding for a valuation of $825 billion. And in May, OpenAI began publicly musing about suing Apple for breach of their partnership agreement because it wasn't making them the money they thought it should have made. But then in July, Apple sued them instead for a much more serious reason. Let's get into some of the specific allegations, and again, only allegations that are in the lawsuit. The first named defendant is Tang Tan, chief hardware officer at OpenAI, who was a 25-year Apple employee who left to start IO Products with Johnny Ive. The filing alleges, and here I'll be quoting from the actual lawsuit filing, which I will link down below so you can go download it and read it yourself. The filing alleges, and I quote, Mr. Tan has directed candidates to bring physical hardware components, parts, and product samples from their Apple work to their OpenAI interviews for show and tell sessions that would disclose Apple's proprietary technologies. Again, quoting from the actual filing, improperly retained or obtained an internal Apple document bearing a need-to-know designation that describes offboarding procedures for Apple's manager. The document details security processes Apple uses to protect the company's confidential information when one of its employees is leaving. Still quoting. OpenAI's personnel referred to this as a checklist that Tang put together, although it is clearly an internal Apple document. Mr. Tan and OpenAI have disclosed it to recruited Apple employees before they notify Apple that they are leaving, providing them with advance notice of Apple's forensic and security checks. That sounds a little damaging. The second named defendant in the suit is Chang Liu, and the filing alleges, quote, Mr. Liu signed and is bound by an IPA, intellectual property agreement, obligating him to protect Apple's confidential information. Around the time of his departure, however, Mr. Liu was unresponsive to Apple's outreach, trying to confirm whether he had returned his devices and complied with other exit procedures, scheduling an exit interview and instructing him to sign Apple's confidentiality reminder. And at the time of his departure, Mr. Liu failed to return at least one Apple-owned computer. Yeah, this is sounding worse, especially for this guy. And now I'm paraphrasing rather than quoting because it was kind of long. But he used a then-unknown security vulnerability to access Apple's network storage and sent a message to an employee still at Apple saying, "LOL, I found out I can access the network storage. So funny." To which the Apple employee replied, "I'm ready. I have warned you on this very channel about messaging and emailing on company-owned devices because the company can read everything you wrote." There's a lot more detail, so I will again link the filing down below so you can go read it yourself. The first 6 pages don't have a lot of legalese. So what's my take on all this? Well, first, for me, it's typical Apple, the same Apple I've been covering for 40 years. Back in the old days, they sued Microsoft for copying the Mac interface under copyright law, the first look and feel case, and sort of won and ended up getting a big investment from Microsoft, but it wasn't really a win. And they sued Samsung for copying iPhone elements under patent law and won a $1 billion judgment, which Samsung was happy to pay because they've gone on and made billions of dollars off of Android phones. Now they're suing OpenAI under trade secrets law because OpenAI is threatening their hardware business. And my personal bet is that this lawsuit is meant to put the brakes on hardware development at OpenAI and possibly delay their IPO even further, putting further squeeze on them. Apple is like a honey badger. If you threaten their business, they'll come after you, especially if you're threatening their business using their own ideas. There's a lot more under the surface here. If you go read other things, you'll discover that like Tan worked under Turnus and didn't get along and wanted Turnus's job, not CEO, the one before that, and didn't get it. So will Apple prevail? Ultimately, it may not matter. If they can delay OpenAI's hardware plans long enough to get Siri AI up and running, and more on that next week because I've got it installed and I'm kind of falling in love with Siri again. So that's it for today. Thanks for stopping by. See you next time. Bye-bye. And next time I'll be demoing Siri AI, and it is really nice so far. Thanks for staying to the end. Bye-bye.